You are listening to the Health and Wellness Connection podcast, the #1 wellness podcast designed to provide the latest information to help you achieve your health and wellness goals. Our show features exciting guests, the latest in medical research, and in-depth discussions in current trends on weight loss, nutrition, and fitness. No matter what your interest, the Health and Wellness podcast has you covered. And now, presenting your illustrious host, Dr. Barry, MD.
Hello, and welcome back to another episode of the Health and Wellness Connection. It's your host, Dr. Barry, and we're still going on, still going strong. And I just want to thank you guys for continuing to listen. Please, guys, this is the premier Health and Wellness podcast on the interwebs. If you want to share the good news and the good information we've spread today, please tell a friend, share with your loved ones and anyone you actually care about. If you don't like them, don't share it, because this show will improve their lives. Just tease. Share it to your enemies too. But either way, this is another episode of the Health and Wellness Connection. It's your host, Dr. Barry. Thanks again for joining us. We got a pretty cool episode today. Got some cool information, cool tips, cool life hacks, and all that stuff. So let's get into it. But before we do that, we want to give a shout out again to all the listeners. Again, thanks for all the love and support you've been sharing. Please, guys, also, if you want to reach out to me, Dr. Barry MD on Instagram, Dr. Barry Tech Doc on Twitter or X, and also email. We do that as well, drbarryhealth@gmail.com. Okay, so this is a pretty cool episode. We have some pretty interesting topics that came across my desk this week. And, let's get into it. So the first story really kind of talks about the future of healthcare and how people get access to healthcare. And as you probably guessed it, AI is going to be a big part of it. Now, of course, AI has been in the news. You have, OpenAI by all those guys over at Silicon Valley who are working on that. The ChatGPT is taking over the world. And, it's definitely changing how people interact with computers. But there's now a push to really get AI in the healthcare field. So maybe one day, instead of talking to a doctor like myself, you may go into your local emergency room or doctor's office and see a robot. And these robots are being trained as we speak. A lot of algorithms being worked on by different companies. But there's some new and interesting information. Now, I truly believe that, AI will never be able to take over healthcare because there's so many personal skills and, you got to actually touch people and feel what people are coming from. And sometimes computers cannot really do that. But I think there are some benefits to AI, and there are some ways that AI can help improve patient care. And one interesting story I did come across comes out of a research outfit out of Germany. And they're looking at how AI can be used as an effective screening tool. This particular research comes out of Germany. They looked at a program named ARTEMIS, which is actually an AI protocol that was designed to screen patients with chest pain coming to the ER. Now, this was reported in a recent episode of The Lancet, one of the premier health journals in the country. And so they looked at ARTEMIS, this new AI, and they were trying to compare it to human screening. And in this case, they looked at chest pain. So everyone with chest pain was instructed to go through this AI to screen them with a series of questions to see whether or not there was a concern for acute heart attack or not. And so what they did was the patients would interact with the computer, which would ask them a series of questions. And using the AI algorithms, they would be able to screen the patient and say, okay, you're fine, go home, or you have a concerning symptom, go to your emergency department. And of course, those that were told to go were then seen by actual physicians who then proceeded with the workup. Now, this, is effective. It's a good idea in my opinion, because, a lot of people come to the emergency room and some people may not have critically serious issues, but they may have concerns. And a lot of times in the ER, we do work on allaying concerns, especially when it's the middle of the night, 2 a.m. and, you have to get checked out because you're not sure what's going on. And a lot of our job is that. But obviously, screening is still part of an entire workup, and you still need actual assessment and evaluation by a trained clinician. But I think the AI can be useful in helping screen patients to help reduce the overloaded emergency rooms that exist throughout the country. So this program looks at chest pain specifically and looked at whether or not this program could screen patients effectively. And it was actually pretty effective. Now, they looked at, groups in Germany, and they looked at folks, about 2,560 patients who were evaluated, who came through the emergency department, who believed they had a suspected heart attack. And out of these 2,560, 166 or 6.5% were ultimately diagnosed with a heart attack. So, the ER is a place where people come when they're truly concerned. And a lot of times, there is a very deadly ailment that's going on, and it requires intervention to avoid a bad outcome. So tools like this can be effective in helping doctors deal with those who are extremely sick quicker, as they're able to screen some of the patients who may not be as sick or who may have other non-life-threatening illnesses, and help basically with the triage process. So this ARTEMIS, again, was used to screen these patients. And what they found was that people who were able to go through the screening program, as well as getting a series of blood tests that we usually use in the emergency room as well to screen patients, they found that they were able to rule out heart attack in about 35% of patients, right? And this was extremely sensitive, meaning out of 35% of patients that were screened out effectively, 99.68% were fine. So it was actually really effective, like 99% success rate in screening patients, and you were able to get 35% of that total number completely screened safely. I think can be very, very helpful, because again, now you have 35% less patients, that the doctor has to see, and that can actually help quite a bit with, increasing speed to care for those who are really sick. Now, the only thing that was found, only one patient was missed out of those patients that were caught, who were missed, meaning they were screened by the ARTEMIS and told to be fine, but they ended up having a heart attack. So the success rate was extremely effective, even more effective than doctors who actually saw these patients. So some people will argue that AI can be even better than doctors because they remove the bias that many doctors might have, and so forth. Now, I do believe that bias definitely exists, but I do believe that people I think there's ways to overcome that, especially with objective tests we do in the emergency room. So I do think that, this AI program was very successful in screening patients, and we'll probably get more studies, bigger, larger studies, to kind of see how effective it is. I mean, this study only looked at about 2,500 patients, which is kind of small. So there's so much you can only take from that. But I think to replace standard of care is going to require larger studies. But yes, so ARTEMIS, is definitely, I think, showing promising signs. And I think things like this can be a great tool for clinicians to use to help them kind of screen patients and treat patients more quickly and more effectively. So yes, AI is coming, and this is just one example. We'll definitely cover more AI-related topics in the coming episodes. All right, guys, so the next story looks at the recent hurricane. Now, I'm sure you guys, if you're not aware, we had a massive hurricane here in the United States, Hurricane Helene. It actually came about a few weeks ago, caused massive damage to parts of the southeastern United States, specifically North Carolina, Georgia, Florida, and other states. Now, apparently, during this episode, we had significant damage to many critical manufacturing plants, specifically Baxter International, which is a huge manufacturer of IV fluids and peritoneal dialysis solutions. So this is very serious because IV fluids are some of the most important parts of healthcare. We use them extensively in the emergency room where I work, and they're used pretty much all throughout the hospital, the critical care units, even the regular floors, because IV fluids are really critical when it comes to patient care. There's so many uses that we use it for. One of the most important uses, or one of the most important treatment modalities we use in the ER or in the hospital. And apparently with this hurricane, there was massive damage to these factories that manufacture these IV fluids, resulting in a massive IV fluid shortage. So if you're someone who's going to the hospital, you may be shocked when you hear the doctors complain of not enough fluids to treat certain conditions. This could be very serious. And, now there's a lot of people working overtime to help get these factories back online. It's believed that IV fluid availability has decreased about 40% across the country. So this is actually very serious because, again, IV fluids are very important and are used quite a bit by, all levels of healthcare. And so this shows you that, there's concern that is the medical infrastructure able to withstand these natural disasters that can cause significant damage to infrastructure. And of course, the government stepped in. President Biden actually, start to allocate resources so that these factors can get online quicker, as well as finding ways to improve and increase the supply of IV solutions by getting other, stores of backup supplies out to the public, opening more imports to other countries who have capacity can ship to the United States, and so forth. So they're working on this, but just want to give you a heads up. If you're heading to the hospital, especially for procedures, surgery, things like that, just be aware that IV fluids are more scarce, more difficult to obtain at this time, so it may affect patient care and patient management. So ultimately, this is something hopefully that'll be short-term or short-lived. But that being said, hurricanes and other natural disasters will be something we have to deal with for the rest of our existence. So I think ensuring that our healthcare infrastructure can withstand these natural disasters is going to be an important thing that leaders in the healthcare industry will have to figure out. If it means maybe relocating factories that have critical, supplies that they're manufacturing to other parts of the country, or just other, backup modalities may have to be looked into. But yes, IV fluid shortage is very real. So be aware, especially if you're scheduled for surgery, procedures, or if you get sick and go to the ER. It's something that everyone needs to be aware of because it can definitely affect patient care. Semaglutide is back in the news again, and it's something, of course, we talk about a lot on this show. And of course, if you don't know, semaglutide is one of the famed GLP-1 inhibitors, which has been very effective for weight loss, also known as Ozempic or Wegovy. These medications have been very popular as of late, being used by many celebrities to, lose weight and just kind of, get rid of excess pounds. And of course, it does this by blocking receptors that the body uses for metabolism, resulting in increased fat burning and decreased appetite, resulting in decreased caloric intake, which ultimately results in weight loss. Now, one thing that has been discovered about these GLP-1 agonists is that they actually are able, they are able to actually affect the brain and the brain chemistry. And now also there's belief that these things may be effective in use in certain disorders, especially when it comes to addiction. Opioid addiction, alcohol addiction, some of the main benefits that we're seeing in patients who are taking these GLP-1 agonists. And it's believed that because these GLP-1 agonists can affect these addictions, that instead of weight loss, people who are trying to get off opioid addiction, alcoholism, may actually be good candidates for these medications. Now, of course, these medications are not approved for, addiction management because, again, they weren't studied for that when they were being researched by the companies that produced them. However, many clinicians are seeing some of these benefits from these medications amongst patients who they're being prescribed to. And I've noticed that in my own practice, I have patients who are prescribed Semaglutide, and they'll be saying, "Hey, Dr. Berry, I've noticed that I don't even want to eat no more, but I also don't really want to drink, or I don't want to smoke anymore." Like, it's crazy. Like, no desire to do any of these things anymore because of these medications. So there's active research being done by many people, especially psychiatrists, other mental health practitioners, to see whether or not these can potentially be approved to help patients who are trying to or dealing with addiction and struggling with addiction. And so one study was done looking specifically at opioid use and whether or not those patients who are prone to opioid overdose, meaning those who are addicted to opioids, could benefit from potentially using these GLP-1 agonists. And so what they did was they looked at patients' medical records, especially those who had type 2 diabetes, because they're the ones who have been on these GLP-1 agonists for a while because they're excellent for blood sugar management. And they found that those who were on semaglutide had a significantly lower risk of opioid overdose, 42 to 68% lower risk. So these people who are prescribed opioids, one thing about opioids that is well known is that they are very addicting, and patients usually have to take more and more doses to get those same effects that they got when they started using the medication. So of course this can be very dangerous because opioids can depress your respiratory drive and lead to people dying from asphyxiation because they're not breathing anymore. So obviously this has been a concern for many practitioners giving these opioids to patients. And as a result, they're finding ways to prevent this has been key. So it seems that those who are on these GLP-1 agonists have a much lower risk of opioid overdose, and I suspect is due to just significant desire or significantly decreased desire of using these medications in an abusive manner. And it's believed that because of this, This could be a reason why these GLP-1 agonists are expanded in their treatment protocol, because opioid addiction is one of the biggest killers of people in America. I believe over 100,000 people die of opioid addiction due to opioid abuse. So this association may be something that can save a lot more lives, and something that I think should be explored further. So GLP-1 agonists, more use outside of the traditional weight loss and diabetic sugar management. Moving on, so when it comes to weight loss, and one thing that is not really talked about a lot is the mental health aspects of weight and overweightness or being overweight, as well as what happens after you lose the weight. And sometimes this can actually unmask hidden mental health issues. There's a phenomenon known as ghost fat, and this is something that many practitioners have discovered in patients who lose a lot of weight, but still have a lot of issues dealing with their new body or dealing with their change in their overall physical appearance. Sometimes people who have lost a significant amount of weight still have beliefs that they're still overweight, that they're having issues, accepting, the fact that they are smaller and that things are actually different than what they were previously. And what's believed to be behind this is that many people, especially if they're unhappy with their appearance and they feel that they have to lose weight, a lot of times when they lose the weight, they notice they have sagging skin and they have, things that are, didn't appear in the way that they thought they would. This can lead to depression, anxiety, a condition known as body dysmorphic disorder, meaning they have this, very unnatural, or they feel very uncomfortable in their bodies despite achieving their weight loss goals. Some researchers believe that this phenomenon is a result of potential mental health issues being unmasked as a result of the weight loss. Because one thing that many people are seeing is that when people lose weight, they tend to get a lot of compliments from people. There'll be, a lot of praise from people that they've maybe even known who've noticed their weight loss. And this can cause sometimes a positive reinforcement arc where you lose 20 pounds, people comment, oh, you've lost so much weight, causing them to get more aggressive with the weight loss, losing more and more weight to get that, positive feedback from people. And it's believed that, especially when using very powerful weight loss drugs like these GLP-1 agonists, many people can overdo it, if you will, and actually lose an extreme amount of weight, which can lead to potential unhealthy side effects. This is a very complicated issue, and it actually underscores the importance of mental health as being critical when dealing with a weight loss strategy. If you guys read my book, Next Level Weight Loss 2.0, we talk about how, obesity is, I believe, a primarily mental issue. People are, having, when it comes to obesity, a lot of times it's a unnatural obsession with food and eating food to the point of where calories and caloric intake is, not really important. It's more so bonding and, using food as a crutch or as a mental health apparatus, if you will. And so when you get to the opposite end of the spectrum, where people lose too much weight, they lose the weight to the point where let's say they believe that they lost weight, they'll start looking like their favorite celebrity. But when they lose the weight, they don't really, look like that, because it takes a lot more than just simply weight loss. You have to be working out, muscle building, overall cardio, conditioning and whatnot. And that's part of the journey. And I think that sometimes when patients are on these meds or on any situation where they lose a lot of weight, sometimes unmasked mental health issues can arise. This is something we see a lot when, patients who lose weight. It's always believed that when they lose the weight, they tend to divorce their spouses. They tend to, become more sexually free. They tend to, sometimes behave more erratically. And this can be a result of people trying to mimic what they think people who have a certain appearance are doing. When the reality is that, weight is usually a byproduct of your mental health a lot of times. And if you're someone who's, maybe addicted to food and you became obese and then you break that addiction, a lot of times now that empty space that you used to fill with food becomes now a place where something potentially harmful as far as behavioral things can take place. And we're seeing that a lot in patients who are, losing weight. So ultimately, I think this is something that, especially in children, adolescents, this is where it becomes very potentially a dangerous situation. When you lose a lot of weight, you get more kind of uninhibited. And before you know it, you're doing potentially things that are way more destructive than losing weight, like hardcore drug use, erratic, violent behavior, and so forth. So I think, it's very important that people who are undergoing weight loss, especially if you have a history of mental health already, to ensure that you're working with your psychiatrist or your mental health professional, as well as your weight loss doctor, to help you deal with some of these potential mental health issues that may be, that may arise. Now, there was one study that looked at this, and it kind of tried to identify if there was a role in genetics potentially that may lead people to develop these, psychological issues after weight loss. One study looked at 827 people, more so adolescents, and they looked at people who had this risk of developing, mental health issues after weight loss. And what they found was that those who were, in this group, they found that those who had a genetic predisposition to being obese, and those people were typically those who had larger body mass indexes, who had type 2 diabetes, signs of chronic kind of overweight due to a strong genetic link, meaning their parents are overweight, grandparents are overweight, and so forth. They found that those people who had this genetic link, meaning a strong family history of obesity, once they lost the weight, there was actually a higher risk of people who developed this body dysmorphic disorder, which leads researchers to believe that perhaps there is a genetic, predisposition of people who lose weight and they tend to become depressed as opposed to being happier. And that's something obviously that's still being studied. Even another interesting phenomenon where people who were victims of sexual abuse, where let's say they were a victim of sexual abuse as a child, and then they maybe became addicted to food as a way of coping with these abuse mechanisms. They became obese as they grew older, and then after losing weight and they become quote unquote more attractive, and they get more people now looking for romantic kind of associations with these people, it actually triggers feelings of PTSD because it actually brings back, thoughts of being sexual assaulted that they suffered as a child. So just very complex kind of mental issues, and it's something that really has not been discussed a lot, but can definitely be a very significant source of stress for people who are going through these processes. So this is something that when people looking at weight loss, understanding, what led to the weight gain, what's going on the mental aspect is critical when creating a appropriate weight or health or weight loss strategy. This is something I do with my patients as well, and I know a lot of clinicians who are in this field are also doing this, because this is very important, because if you don't approach this and people lose weight all of a sudden and they aren't able to deal with the new reality of their new bodies, it can definitely lead to a worse outcome as far as longevity and livelihood and so forth. This is why you see some people, they'll say, yeah, I lost weight, but I felt terrible, so then I went ahead and got fat again or gained weight again, and now I feel better. So, a lot of times that's more mental as opposed to just physical or, other issues. So, mental health and weight loss is something that's very, very linked. So much so that you see sometimes clinicians recommending antidepressants for people who are on weight loss strategies to help prevent that. And those who are currently taking antidepressants, that needs to be closely monitored as well, because sometimes they require a change or adjustment in those treatment patterns as well. So working with psychiatrists is critical, I think, in helping kind of manage weight loss in patients, because mental health is really important when it comes to weight loss and weight loss management. And it also kind of removes that whole idea that weight loss is automatically equal to happiness. Sometimes weight loss can lead to other mental issues, and not all of them are happy. Now, of course, we want people to be happier and understand the healthier version of themselves is usually the better version of themselves, but that also requires, prepping the mind to deal with the change in other people's behavior to you as you kind of develop into your new you. So, yes, mental health and weight loss is very, very closely linked. And I think you have to be very important, and you have to be very aware of both areas when dealing with patients, and also when dealing with weight loss on your own. Stress is one of those things that everyone knows is very, very bad. I'm sure everyone understands that stress and the highest levels of stress can lead to many terrible things for long health and negatively affect wellness. Stress is linked to increased risk of strokes, heart attacks, obesity, and the like. Now, one hormone that's been very, closely linked with stress is cortisol. And lately on TikTok, I'm sure you guys have seen that there's a big trend on TikTok that's addressing cortisol levels and preventing a phenomenon known as moon face, which is moon face meaning, your face is very circular, very round. It's believed this is developed due to increased fluid retention, due to high cortisol levels, and so forth. Now, When it comes to cortisol, this is actually one of those hormones that is very important in helping the body deal with stress, hence the reason why you see increased levels when patients are in stressful conditions. We can actually measure cortisol levels in the lab, and it can be used to help guide treatment for certain issues. Of course, Health and Wellness Clinic is part of, we can do that as well. So if you're interested in getting hormone management advice, please reach out to us, and we can maybe see what we can do for you. But overall, cortisol is one of those stress hormones that has been strongly linked with, stress, I should say. And high levels of this hormone can lead to many obvious side effects, including fluid retention, swelling, and this phenomenon known as moon phases. Now, moon phases is known in the medical community as a byproduct of dealing with Cushing's syndrome, which is basically a condition where the body has very, very high levels of cortisol due to an adrenal dysfunction. So it's not really the same thing, but high levels of cortisol due to chronic stress can lead to kind of increased swelling, increased fluid retention, and that can be an issue. So dealing with stress is really important. And I know TikTok kind of promotes all these products and whatnot to help reduce cortisol. You don't really need products, you just need behavioral changes. Ways to deal with stress and reduce cortisol levels naturally is doing things like sleeping more. 6 to 8 hours sleep per day can help significantly reduce cortisol levels. Exercise, physical activity, 30 minutes a day at least for at least 3 to 5 times a week can also help reduce cortisol levels. So being active is key. Why cortisol levels need to come down, you say? Well, cortisol, like I said, is related to a lot of conditions, including skin deterioration. Cortisol actually inhibits proper development of skin cells like collagen, hyaluronic acid, and healthy lipids. So when cortisol levels are high and stress levels are high, you tend to see immediate effects on the skin. It can cause skin to look more sallow, more unhealthy, if you will. And so reducing cortisol can do wonders just for skincare. This is why you see people develop pimples and so forth, especially if they're chronically stressed. And, helping cortisol levels stay at a lower level can be critical in helping reduce some of these changes we see in the skin. Also can help reducing, fluid retention, like we said. So when you have swollen legs and feet. So if you're sitting down all the time at the job and you're stressed out, this is why you see a lot of people retaining fluids to the point where they have swollen ankles, swollen legs, and so forth. And also, stress cortisol levels can be associated with increased intake of ultra-processed sugars and carbohydrates. So if you're stressed out, eating a lot of sugar, not being active, not sleeping, you can see the crazy unhealthy milieu being developed in your body, leading to a lot of appearances of obesity, increased levels of stress, fine lines, wrinkles, and the like. So how do you counteract this, you say? Well, of course, increasing your sleep, 6 to 8 hours, like I stated, working out, being physically active, eating foods rich in antioxidants and anti-inflammatory properties. We're going to do a great show, guys, on supplements that also you can consider as well adding to your regimen to help increase your antioxidant intake. We've talked about antioxidants so much in this show, guys. If you want to learn more, just go to our page, go to your favorite website. Spotify is what I like, Health and Wellness Connection, and look at the shows on antioxidants. We talk about a lot of great ones. We're going to do another great show on supplements and antioxidants very soon. But antioxidants intakes can help reduce some of these levels of stress hormones and help reduce some of the damage being done by some of these stress hormones as well. So, sleeping, drinking your water, 2 liters a day for most people is adequate. Working out, a lot of excellent ways to reduce stress. And of course, staying away from toxic people. People stressing you out, giving you all kinds of headache and heartache. It's literally get them out of your lives. That can literally be life-saving. And I can't stress that enough, guys. So stress levels low usually leads to good things. All right, another study that came across my desk looks at MRI-derived abdominal adipose tissue. So basically fat in your gut. People with the big bellies, a lot of fat around the midline area. This has a strong association with chronic musculoskeletal pain. So researchers looked at the UK Biobank, again, a very common source of data mining and manipulation. And they looked at people who had actually large amounts of adipose tissue that were measured by MRI. So they had an MRI of the stomach, and they saw patients who had a certain amount of fat in their stomachs. And they looked at their overall condition, especially when it came to chronic pain. They looked at pain in the neck, shoulders, back, hip, and knees, all over the body. And they looked at these people and saw, kind of how they were managed. And they found that those who had issues with chronic pain, meaning they were currently on pain medication, you can see that they had issues with regular activity throughout their livelihood. They had difficulty dealing with regular activities throughout their life due to chronic muscle pain. And they found that there could be an association with excessive fat and the pathogenesis of pain and pain sensations by the body. So this is really just a kind of a loose association, but I think there is some potential validity to this, because they found that those who had these higher levels of abdominal fat tend to have more complaints of chronic pain that was not being, taken care of with medication or just general, lifestyle changes. Now, of course, there is a concern that if you're overweight and you have a lot of abdominal fat, you're going to probably have more stress in your joints, causing more chances of you having chronic pain. So I think there's that there, but there's some belief that there's a physiological link where that fat is actually producing certain hormones and creating an environment where the body is more sensitive to pain and is unable to deal with pain on its own, requiring, issues or behavioral changes by the person. So, this is like, they look back at data. So I think this definitely indicates there is a need to maybe do more research to see if whether or not people who have these large amounts of abdominal fat, have a physiological link to pain. And I think obviously pain is one of the biggest issues people deal with in the world. Pain is responsible for extremely, for affecting productivity globally. So I think finding ways to help reduce pain that don't involve narcotics or other strong, pain management solutions definitely should be considered. All right, guys. So the next story looks at October and the condition known as, or the phenomenon known as sober October. So there's, October is a period usually of partying and carrying out and hanging out, but it's believed that, there's a movement now to get people to recognize sober October, where they, they try to reduce their alcohol intake due to the issues we see with alcohol and its excessive abuse and consumption. Now, of course, alcohol is one of those things that are truly a poison. Now, I do drink alcohol, so I'm not going to be here trying to say that I'm better than everyone else. However, it is something that people should be aware of. The alcohol is definitely a poison and damages tissues. Now, your bodies are able to handle it. You have a liver that's able to detoxify alcohol and make it less poisonous. But if it's consumed in excess, it can definitely overwhelm your body's ability to detoxify it, leading to very serious consequences. Now, we do know that people who consume alcohol regularly have higher risk of chronic diseases such as heart disease, cancer, and early death. So, and it's believed that over 178,000 people die from alcohol-related diseases each year. Especially alcohol, and alcohol-related liver disease is one of the leading causes of liver transplants. And liver transplants are hard to get, so something you definitely don't want. So this whole thing of Sober October is designed to help people become aware of the dangers of alcohol and understand that while alcohol can be fun to consume, it's definitely something that should not be abused due to the chronic, large amount of side effects and negative outcomes associated with excessive consumption. So again, guys, it's okay to drink occasionally, but there really is no safe amount of alcohol to consume. So just be aware of that. And if you do drink, do it safely, do it responsibly, and try to, reduce it if you can. But of course, this is the holiday season, so I know the drinks will be flowing, and I will be consuming them. I will be consuming some myself. Don't get it twisted. However, you want to be aware of the dangers of excessive consumption, and Sober October is a way to kind of remind people that, alcohol is something that should be consumed, with a acknowledgement that there's definitely some concerns and dangerous side effects that are associated with it, guys. So try to, reduce your alcohol intake for Sober October, and hopefully you still have a great October with a little less alcohol in your system. All right, guys, COVID-19 is back in the news, and there is concern that COVID-19 may actually be associated with some pretty concerning conditions. It's believed that COVID-19 may increase the risk of heart attacks, strokes, and death for 3 years after an infection. So we know COVID-19 is one of those viruses that really shook the world and really did a lot of damage when it first came on the scene in 2021. And there was, concern that because we know COVID, it causes a severe inflammatory response throughout the body, and it's causing damage to parts of the body due to the severe inflammation that it was able to create. that there was concern that there was definitely a risk that the vascular system, which is critical for body's normal functioning, if damaged, can lead to some of these conditions like heart attack, stroke, and other issues. Well, there's now official evidence that COVID can actually damage the body and the blood vessels specifically to the point where it actually causes increased risk of heart attacks and strokes because, again, these conditions are usually linked to blood cell inflammation and dysfunction. This is why you get heart attacks. The blood vessels in the heart are inflamed. Usually clots break out, obstruct blood flow, leading to muscle damage. Same thing happens in the brain and the blood vessels there. So this is why, COVID-19, while it's believed to be similar to the flu, but some of the dangerous side effects and long-term effects of COVID have yet to be established. And so some of these recent data that's coming out on different studies, this one here came out and was done by, it was actually published, in the Medical Journal of Atherosclerosis, Thrombosis, and Vascular Biology. So a bunch of vascular biologists, these are, basically scientists who look at the vascular system in the body and the effects of different pathogens on it. This one looked at COVID. It looked at over 11,000 people who had a positive lab test for COVID in the year 2020. And out of these 11,000, 3,000 were hospitalized. So this is pretty severe, pretty severe COVID infections that a lot of these people had. And they compared these two groups of over 222,000 people who didn't have any COVID. And they found that those who had COVID, compared to those who did not have COVID, had a significantly higher risk of heart disease, heart attacks, and strokes compared to those who did not have COVID. And this is concerning because we know COVID can cause damage, but some of the damage is actually microscopic. And if you're having microscopic damage to your blood vessels that's not really detectable normally, the concern is that those who had COVID and develop these damaged blood vessels as a result have have a significantly higher risk of some of these cardiovascular issues compared to those who didn't. And they found that those who had certain blood types, particularly A, B, or AB, had a higher risk of cardiovascular disease compared to those who had O blood type. So it's believed that blood type is also playing a role in how likely someone is to get COVID. And people who have O blood type are a little bit protected when it comes to getting COVID and some of these long-term issues we're seeing with COVID infection. So COVID is, again, one of those bugs that has been very, very concerning, has a lot of issues that we're seeing, and it's not really clear all the damage that it can do to the body. And this study just shows that much more research needs to be done on COVID and some of the long-term effects, the phenomenon of long COVID, how dangerous is it if you're having chronic inflammation for long periods of time. And the science is showing that you definitely are at risk for some cardiovascular issues if COVID is not controlled properly. All right, guys. So that's all for this week. We have a lot of cool stuff on the horizon, guys. So stay tuned for that. Again, thanks for listening to the show. If you have any questions or concerns, you want to reach out to me, please reach out to me at Dr. Barry on Instagram, Dr. Barry MD on Instagram, I should say. Email drbarryhealth@gmail.com. Again, drbarryhealth@gmail.com, and also on Twitter, Dr. Barry Tech Doc, and also TikTok as well, Dr. Barry Health. Thanks a lot for listening to this episode. We will be back very soon with another episode of the show. Thanks for listening. Stay tuned. Love you all. Peace.
Thank you for listening to the Health and Wellness Connection podcast and radio show. For more information on ways to get healthy, please check us out. www.anchor.fm/HW Connection. Here you can re-listen to the show, check out older shows, and even further support the show by becoming a subscriber to the podcast. Please check us out today. Again, that's anchor.fm/HW Connection. And also, don't forget to follow Dr. Barry on Instagram at drbarrymd. Until next time, stay healthy.